Welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast, helping engineers, producers, and artists create professional recordings and mixes even from home. I'm your host, Mike and Davina. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast. My name is Mike and Davina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Joe Reinhart, and if you're not familiar with him, he is an engineer, producer, mixer, and multi-instrumentalist from Philadelphia. He is a co-owner of Headroom Studios, where he's worked with artists such as Joyce Manor, Modern Baseball, Beach Bunny, the Sonderbombs, and so many more. And in this conversation, we have a great chat all about the records that Joe has made and his process for recording and producing bands. And we get into this really great conversation about the topic of templates and how to build templates that offer a lot of flexibility. You know, one of the biggest things that a lot of people argue against when it comes to this idea of building and using templates is that people think that their songs will all sound the same. But when you hear how Joe's built his template, I think you're going to realize that there can be a lot of flexibility in it. And, you know, when you build proper templates, it allows you to just work fast, smart, get the sounds that you want quicker, and to still have the options that will make songs sound different. You know, templates on their own aren't going to make everything sound the same. I really disagree with that argument. But if you ever thought that, I think you're going to find it very helpful to hear how Joe's got his stuff set up, because it's a little different than most people think about when it comes to building their template. So with that said, I think you're going to find this episode really exciting. I think you're going to learn a ton from it. Joe's just such a fun guy, great attitude, great energy. So I think you're going to really enjoy this one. So let's just jump right into it. Joe Reinhart, thank you so much for being on the Master Your Mix podcast. How's it going, man?
It's feeling great to be on the Master Your Mix podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Well, for people who might not be familiar with you, can you give us a little bit of your background on who you are, how you got into audio, and all the cool stuff you're working on these days?
Wow, it's a
loaded question.
How much time do we have? Yeah. Well, we'll start with day one. I think I saw the basket case video, Green Day, and I was like, that's fast. That's catchy. I've never heard anything that sounded like that before. What's up with this? And I was like, oh, the guitar. You know, my dad had an acoustic guitar. I grabbed that. That parlayed into his friend had an electric that he gave me, and then my friend got an electric around the same time. Then our other friend did, and we took his sister's karaoke machine and started singing into it. We found some drums in the trash. Now we have a band. We're making demos on a Talkboy, and this is probably we're in 6th grade.
Yeah. At
this point, yeah.
I love that you mentioned the Talkboy. I think you're the first person on this podcast to mention recording with that.
Oh, that was. I thought I invented multi-tracking. We would record the drums, bass, and guitar with the Talkboy, and then we put the Talkboy tape in a boom box. You know, the boom box that everybody had with just the 2 cassettes. Play it out of that, overdub the lead guitar and vocals, and record it into a new Talkboy tape.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I can't find the demo. I've looked. I've looked through every tape I have. I don't know where it is.
And for people who don't know what a Talkboy is, just go back and watch Home Alone. I think that was what invented the Talkboy, as far as I'm concerned. That's where it first got discovered. So yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
So it was a gateway drug from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you picked up on it that young, and you were talking about the Green Day basket case video, and that was definitely as we were talking about before, we're kind of around the same age, and that was definitely a big video for me as well. And Green Day was my first concert. My uncle took me there to see them when I was 10, which was amazing. And, definitely got that bug going. So I can certainly relate to that. That's awesome.
It wasn't until later that I had friends with older brothers and sisters that would be like, yo, here's what No Effects is. Or, you know what, here's these other not on the radio punk things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was the first time I ever heard that sound, how nailsy and biting it is. Mm-hmm. And just how in your face it is. And, I remember my friend telling me his older brother says it's called punk. And that was the first time I heard that. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, not that I still only listen to Green Day, but
fair. No, but hey, we all have that band that's kind of like our gateway in, you know?
Yeah. And
Amazing.
so that excited me. And after that was just a need to do it yourself. You know, we needed to record something. So we recorded something. I think umpiring baseball games and mowing lawns and whatever it was, scraped my way to a 4-track, a Tascam X7, Fostex X77. Maybe this summer between 8th grade and high school. Maybe in 8th grade. I don't remember where I was at that point. But yeah, that was recording all the bands we could find. We started a little record label.
At 8th grade, that's amazing.
Just trying to do it all. I mean, it was bad. It was bad on all accounts, but it was what needed to be done.
No, for sure. You have to have those like early years of making some bad recordings and just, you know, hoping for the best and just learning, right? And it sounds like you were learning it all yourself too. So yeah, when you're young and you're figuring it out, like, yeah, you're going to make some bad recordings. It reminds me like some of my earliest recordings, like oh man, like I cringe when I listen back to them. But it's funny that the very first band I ever recorded, like 18 years later, I came back to them. Like I still know those guys really well. And I was like, guys, I feel like I ripped you off so bad back in the day, like making that first record. And we actually did record like the first song we did. We re-recorded it again like a couple of years ago. And it's amazing to see that progress you make, right?
Yeah, wow. That's fun.
Yeah. So yeah, you started like you were on this Fostex recorder. You were kind of learning it all yourself. Take us from there. Like, you know, was that it? Was like it was just like at that point it was game on. I'm becoming a professional recording engineer. Like, was that the game plan, or you know, how did that evolve for you?
The game plan was always playing. You know, being the musician. Yeah, it still excites me the most. But a close second is just still being in that world. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to make money off of playing music solely. So it's like, well, if I have to have another job or I have to have another source of income or any income, because playing music doesn't make me any money, I still want to be around it. I still want to immerse myself in any way, shape, or form. And so recording was just that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously, I mean, it sounds like there were enough local bands around you at that time to be able to keep busy with it, or to at least keep your chops up, I'm guessing, right?
Oh, yeah, we were pretty fortunate. Like growing up, we grew up in Yardley, PA, which is in traffic 50 minutes to Philly. And just like those suburbs, just VFW hall shows, just all the way to the basements in Philly. Like the suburbs just like oozed bands. Like it was just always happening. And just being at the shows and shooting the shit and talking to people, being like, yeah, I'll record your demo. It's like, oh, well, we got this side project, record that. I was like, okay, I don't care. Yeah, I'll record that too.
Yeah. I have a good friend of mine's from Philly, and yeah, he always talks about that scene there, and he's like, yeah, everyone had a band, and then everyone had a side project, and like it was just like it was a good time. Lots of music going on in that community at that time.
Yeah, back when time existed, and there was a lot of it.
We didn't need a real job and whatnot.
yeah, that's probably what it was.
Yeah, I guess. So then, did you ever have a mentor at all throughout the process of learning this stuff, or was it was all just self-taught and just trial and error?
Yeah, no, I've had mentors. I would say a lot of trial and error until about I can't forget when I met him, but I went to Drexel University for recording. I actually went to a bunch of schools for recording, but I kept dropping out to either do recording or go on tour or do something. So going to college took forever. And if I had to go for something, I went for music technology or whatever the hell the track was called. Mm-hmm. And there, the guy who ran the studios, I was like, gotta make friends with that motherfucker. He has the key. He's gonna get me in there. And he ended up being a lifelong, really best friend, Ryan Schwab. And yeah, he lives down the street. And to this day, you know, we were texting this morning about plugins and when we're gonna hang out and get a beer and stuff. So I've learned a lot from him, and also like my peers, like the recording community in Philly is like, it's not like cutthroat or anything. I don't know what it's like in other cities, but like we all know each other. We're all friendly. Some of us are very friendly. It's like, yo, I'm recording this band that I'm really excited about. I was like, can I borrow your U67 so I can have two? Yeah. And you use them as overheads? Yeah, totally, man. Like, I need it on this day, but come and grab it. You know, like just shooting the shit with my friends who do the same thing. I learn a lot from too.
I love that. I mean, being involved in a community of like-minded people is such a crucial thing, right? Especially like, yeah, just like you said, like collaborating. Like, I think that's so cool. And you know, the idea of like collaboration versus competition, to me, it's like I totally like agree with that. You know, so it's great to be part of a scene where people are just that supportive and, you know, helping each other out. That's great. You're definitely going to grow fast that way.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like so and so will get the project that I wanted, but on a different day, like we'll be like, "Yo, I'm too busy to mix this. Can you mix this thing?" You know, so it's like, it feels good.
That's amazing. Yeah. Love it, man. Cool. So yeah, I'd love to dive into like some of your process a little bit. And I know that you do like a lot of your credits. You kind of are like the guy who does everything. You'll do the production, the recording, the editing, mixing, all that kind of stuff. So I think let's maybe start from the production side of things. When it comes to working with a new artist, how involved do you like to get in production? And like, are you getting involved in the songwriting stage of it? Or are you kind of letting bands do their own thing there? Like, what do you see as your role of the producer?
It's always a conversation, and it usually changes throughout once we get rolling. You know, I see it as my job to fill in where I think there's a gap or where the gaps exist. And sometimes it's not at all on a track. And sometimes it's a train wreck and I feel like I need to sort of make the train go. But the first thing we'll do is just talk, and I'll be like, hey, if you're interested, since we're doing this record together, make demos, send them to me, and I will very meticulously go through them and give you all of my notes on everything for every song. And it takes me a really long time to do, and it's usually a pretty long conversation afterwards. And again, I'm not nitpicking things to nitpick things. Like some of the songs I'll leave alone. No notes, 10 out of 10, release the demo, you know? Like, let's not even record this. This is perfect.
Yeah, you're not being hired to make up excuses for things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if a song is a good song, then it's a good song.
No, yeah, it's like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't even care how it sounds. I shouldn't be saying that, but I don't because it's awesome. And yeah, so it could just be like, hey, you know, what is the kick pattern here exactly? Like, because throughout the part it feels like it keeps changing. Like, maybe we shouldn't be worrying about the fills, and like let's figure out what the groove is, or you get it, whatever it might be. Hey, this bridge is dragging. Like, maybe we cut it in half and the hi-hat goes to 16ths instead of 8ths, or whatever the conversation might take us. And I always tell the band that it's totally up to them what they want to do with this information. I'm like, you can take it. You can be like, great idea. Let's do it. Terrible idea. It's great the way it is. Or what I like is when it becomes like a conversation, a back and forth thing, or at least it gets them thinking, hey, maybe I don't like his idea of this one thing, but he is right. There's something about this part that maybe needs to come or go or change, or, you know, I'm just trying to arm them with info. And that'll continue throughout the whole thing. I'll be like, hey, I know you want this part to sound big, but everybody playing the same thing might not be the way to make it sound big. Like, somebody needs to drop out a beat here, or just trying to help them get to where they want to go. And it's totally up to them. I have no like ego in the issue. Like, the way I see it, they're paying me for any help I can give.
For sure. I think it's really good though to like establish that early on. Like, okay, I've got some ideas, take them or leave them, or like, you know, what's my role here? Do you just want me to press buttons and hit record, or do you want me to actually have some actual input? You know, so yeah, that's good to have those conversations. What kind of things would you say you typically hear in a lot of demos that you might go back and forth with the artists on? Like, what are some of those common problems that you see with people's songs?
With drumming, it's overplaying. And just people not really listening to each other. or only listening like the guitar player wrote the song, so everybody's playing to the guitar player and hitting every cadence the guitar player's doing, and like that's totally sick if it's the Ramones. But if it's something with some other kind of nuance or something trying to sound hip, like an emo band doesn't need to hit every beat of this crazy guitar riff. Like, I always think of it as like it's a puzzle, and if all the puzzles are the exact same fucking piece, then it just is a stupid pile, and it's not going to like spread out and feel big. So I always hear people really focusing on their own parts, which obviously you're supposed to do, but like how it interacts with other people's parts. And it's definitely a product, I think, of like where you're practicing. Because if you're in like this basement or this like tiny room and everything's like sounds crazy, and the only way to make a part feel bigger is to play harder or like hit the kick and the snare at the same time or play bass chords or turn on the big muff, like that might not always make it feel bigger once like things are crisp and punchy and in a recording environment and the low end's going all over the place. Like I think that's why like I think when like bands like start transitioning to like bigger rooms, then they can hear like the openness and like hear what the low end's doing. It's like, yo, that song we have where like it's like mid-tempo and like the bass is dropping out for some hits, like that song sounds fucking amazing when we play at like, you know, in one of these big clubs. And then our other songs that are just chaos, like sound like fucking chaos. So that's it. Just trying to get them to be like, hey, this is like different than where you wrote it. What do you think? And if you like it the way it is, cool. You're probably right. It's your band, but this is how I'm hearing it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think that it's what I hear often is that it's like you said, like people are playing their own parts, they're focusing on their own stuff. And it isn't really until they actually demo their music that they finally hear what other people are doing. Because yeah, they're in those like these little rehearsal spaces that are just so loud and they, you know, it's impossible to make out any detail. So it's like, I agree with you. Like bands should always be trying to at least make some sort of demo to listen back, because it's the easiest way to actually pick apart what's happening and have the drummer lock in with the bass player, or, you know, make sure the guitar players are playing the same strumming patterns and stuff like that. And, you know, really pick up on like those little details that make a band sound tight. Because yeah, if you're just in a noisy room, you're going to lose all those details. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like that's definitely the thing that I see happen the most too. Yeah. People aren't just paying attention to anyone else in the band but themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's different when like a group of people come in and just play, and I'm just like recording this sick band for 3 days and they just like rip out an LP because everybody just is mature and locked, and maybe it's chaotic and maybe it's a little sloppy, but that's the charm. And I love that too. But it seems like the rest of the time people have this vision, and it's our job to help get them there.
Of course. Do you find that happens more so with bands who are recording their first record with you, or like does it still happen on the second record? Like, do you feel like they learn their lesson after like experiencing it once in the studio?
With me?
Yeah.
Yes, totally. I've definitely had bands come with their second record, and it always makes you smile. They're like, yeah, we kind of were thinking of you like when we were writing this, being like, I don't know, I think Joe would say this, and they're like, yeah, Joe would say that. And so they come back in. I'm like, wow, this is, I love you guys. This is amazing. Y'all nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That always makes me really happy when they say shit like that.
Yeah. The studio is definitely like a learning environment as well as like a creative place too, you know? So,
yeah. Cause I mean, I'm not recording, the next Coldplay record. Like I'm always like the new signing guy or like the second record guy. Like, let's take it to the next, what's next for this band? What can they do next? So like, there is always like a perfect element of youth with an enthusiasm and learning to be had with these bands that I have. And I'm not trying to squash that by any means, but you know what I mean? Like just try to tidy it up a bit.
Of course. Yeah. There's the magic there and that energy that the band comes in with, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Especially on those like earlier records where they've had more time to like really just work on these songs and get like the best versions of them. And yeah, they're just excited to get in the studio and move forward with their career. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting time for most bands.
It is. And it make a lot of friends a lot of people I'm still like friends with. Like we had a blast, we connected, you know?
That's great.
Yeah.
So I know that this is a loaded question then, but when it comes to analyzing these songs and coming up with your notes and that kind of stuff, how do you decide like what makes a good song? What makes a song sound like it should, as opposed to like a song that needs work?
Well, that's why I always tell people, hey, anything I say to you is just my opinion. Like, I'm not right. You're right. It's your band. It's your song. It's your vision. I'm only telling you what I think and what I like. And my opinion is all I have. And it's all you have. It's what makes your band special because it's what you like to do. So I don't have like a formula. I gravitate towards it or I don't. This part, I don't get it. But if you believe in it, let's roll with it. And sometimes they're like, yeah, you're right. It's kind of whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. Or they're like, I don't know. It makes the whole up and down of the song really jump for me. And I'm like, great, cool. I'll follow your lead. I'm in. So it's really just my opinion, which sounds silly, but.
No, that makes sense though, right? Sometimes it's like, sometimes if a band could justify why they played the parts they did, then like they obviously have intention behind it, and it's good to know that intention. Whereas like you might suggest something and then realize that the band's like, oh yeah, that was just like that throwaway part that we just quickly wrote just because we needed a bridge or something like that. And like, okay, maybe we can spend some time working on this a little bit, you know? So
totally.
You sometimes uncover those little things, and yeah, it helps you shape those songs a little bit stronger. Do you typically record bands like live off the floor, or are you the kind of person that does everything like tracking everyone separately? What's your normal approach there?
It's situational.
Yeah.
It depends on the band. Like I always start with everybody playing together and we're micing everything like we're keeping it. So see where that goes. And if at some point it's apparent that like, I don't know, maybe the bass player is not really hearing things right in their headphones and they need a little bit of time to like take a deep breath, sit down and like have it blast them in the face with the monitors and turn up the kick drum and like talk about parts, then we'll do that. Or it's like we get all the rhythm tracks and it's like, I don't know, I feel great about this. Everybody else? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But at least when we're making decisions, I want to hear the whole band playing back. I don't want to just like the drummer to be playing to a click or the rhythm guitar player. Cause like, we're going to talk about things. We're like, how does this part make you feel? Like when we get here, like this transition seems like everybody just sort of smashes into a wall and then this next part happens. Like,
yeah,
I want to like have them go play it. Then we'll go listen to it, talk about it, make any changes. And then we come back in and see if it worked or not. And whether we're keeping the guitar or whatever, I don't know, but it's more so about getting the foundation solid for me.
For sure. How far in advance do you usually do all of your pre-production notes?
As soon as they get me demos and a deposit, because it takes me a really long time to do. And I don't want to, it takes me a really long time to do the pre-pro stuff. And I just want to like have dates on the calendar and like have because I need to put it into like my calendar, just the pre-pro, like, you know, work on some of these songs today. And I can only do so many songs a day because it's like a little draining. Like I'll do like 4 songs a day tops and then go into mixing or writing or something.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely putting a lot of consideration to your notes, and you're not just like, you know, randomly suggesting parts for the sake of having a note. Yeah, so yeah makes sense. Do you find that you'll take those demos sometimes and like rearrange them and like do that kind of thing on your side just to see if like an arrangement works better one way or another?
I have, but it's not so often.
Cool. I'd love to shift over to the mixing side of things because I know you do a lot of that as well. So I'd love to know, like, when you start a mix, similar to the question about production, like when you start a mix, what's your typical mindset going into that? Like, how do you start? Where do you start? What's that normal workflow look like?
I think it depends if I tracked it or not. Depends on the year, but I'm probably half and half, mixing things I tracked, mixing things other people tracked. If it's mine, I just dig in. I know what I want. I just start turning things. I start going to the problem area and making it not a problem area for me anymore. So I can just listen and then find the next thing that's like tugging your ear. With other people's stuff, I do have a mix template that obviously changes, but I have like, I'm big with like plugin presets. So like I'll have, let's just say, for example, a drum reverb. On that drum reverb, I'll probably have 2 or 3 drum reverbs, but within those 2 or 3 drum reverbs, like I'll have my favorite 2 small rooms, or favorite 3 small rooms, and they'll all be volume matched. So when I like bypass them and go between them, like I can just hear what that drum reverb is doing, that small room drum reverb is doing without any volume change. So I'll be like, oh, that's the vibe for this one. And then maybe obviously tweak it, but just so I'm not like flipping through a bunch of reverbs and picking the one that's louder because it's more in my face. And then I'll have a long room or a delay or whatever, and then I'll blend those. But either way, like something will be up. I'll get the whole mix going, and then with I have the SSL UF8 controller.
Yep.
So I'll just use the and so I'll have the VCAs. So I'll just get a quick mix using VCAs with drums, bass, guitars, whatever. And then once it's like sounds like loud, punchy, ballpark, like not ballpark, but like listenable, not just like roughs from whatever they sent me. I'll usually walk away, come back, then hit play where I can just like listen to it all together and see what's up. But the template is big because it sort of just gets things like crispier and how I like it right off the bat. And obviously a bazillion changes to be made within that, but it's helpful to just have that, like, be able to pop up the speakers a little bit on an early listen and then make the decisions. Like, obviously we've all had this conversation, what is important in this mix.
Yeah. I love that idea of like having a template that has options in it, because it's not just about like having the same plugin all the time or the same sound all the time. It's like, you're able to like quickly audition sounds to see what works best for the song. And the fact that you've gain matched everything already, that's great. That's really cool. Cause I think, I teach a lot about building templates as well. And one of the biggest things that I hear people argue is like, well, isn't a template going to make everything sound all like cookie cutter and all the same? And it's like, not really, because you're working with different songs, different tempos, different, tones and all this stuff. And I guess if you have a template that has all of those different options in there, then that opens up the world of opportunities even further. So it's not, it's about working fast. And I think that's the biggest reason for using templates, is like just to get up and running quickly, as opposed to like, spending hours just building your session and finding the right plugin and this and that. But if you have your go-to things that you know and you trust, and you can choose between different options, and that's definitely going to help you get a fast result using stuff that you're comfortable and familiar with.
What are some of your, what do you preach about mixed templates?
For me, it's really about like being organized. I think having like your plugins already in there, having your routing all set up, I think that's a really big part of it. And just making sure that you're consistent with it. Like, putting your tracks at a similar level every time so that your compressors react the same way, and, like that kind of stuff. Because that's where I think a lot of people mess up their templates, is that they'll have something and then they just throw random tracks in there that all come at different levels. And then you're kind of like dismantling that template, or trying to reverse engineer it to work for the song. But I think if you just gain stage everything, then all of a sudden your compressors work the way they're supposed to. And, you might even have a rough balance already with your faders and stuff like that. And I think that's going to allow you to just get that sound, that rough mix, at least, way quicker. Right. But I kind of do the same thing as you, where like I'll have multiple, options for reverbs, and, I love to do like, I'll have multiple, I really love like using distortion on bass and like using some amp sims on bass. And so I'll typically have a few different bass tracks. And as soon as I bring in a bass for a mix, like I'll just drag it to each track just to see, okay, this one sounds better. This one, like I do it that way just to work really quick that way. So it's kind of a similar approach, but I love that.
Do you find that's quicker than just having the plugins on one track and then being able to bypass them?
Sometimes, because what I could do is like I'll have my plugin chain that I like, with my different amp sim on there, and I don't have to like go dismantle or like removing plugins or anything like that. I just highlight the tracks, hit delete, and it's quick and easy for me. I don't know. I find that easier personally, but the nice thing about this is that there's so many different ways to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So. No, that's cool. But I don't hear too many people talking about having those options in their template. So, very, very cool to hear. I like that a lot.
They're like parallel compressors. Like I'll have like 3 sitting there and just, maybe one's a distortion. So they'll be like, I'll have my two compressors as a parallel, and I'll just audition them real quick. I'm like, then I'll pull up the distortion. Maybe I'll have two of the distortions. And again, it's all in the same inserts. They're just bypassed or made inactive.
I do that with compressors often. Like I'll have a couple different versions of a compressor, like on a vocal. I might have like an optical, like LA2A, and then I might have an 1176 or something like that. And I'll audition that way. But yeah, for certain like things where it's like a tonal change overall, that's when I'll put it on separate tracks, I guess.
Right. Yeah, that's when I'll do like the parallel. So if I'm being like extremely aggressive with whatever I'm mutating, like that's on the parallel, and then I'll have different options for that.
Yeah, that's very cool. As far as like so you put everything into your template, you got all these options and you're cycling through things. Do you find that you typically work in a specific order? Like, do you always tackle the drums first or the vocals first or that kind of thing? Or is it just kind of whatever is catching your attention as a problem first?
The first thing I'll do is auto align the drums. You know that plugin?
I know it, but I haven't ever used it.
Did you like drag phase relations things to drums ever?
Yeah.
This is that, but it's a plugin. Check it out. You're welcome. it's fucking sick. And you'll have them all going, and it takes a sec, but as soon as you bypass them, you're like, oh my God. Holy hell. The drums just boop. And sometimes it's a huge boop, and sometimes it's just like, oh, that's a little more chunky. That's better. But I've never been like, is that better? But that's the only thing I always do first. And then after that, it's whatever's rubbing me. It's whatever feels, after there's a balance, a ballpark balance. It's like whatever is the first thing that's like, I cannot concentrate on other things until this gets fixed. And maybe I have to immediately start automating the vocal because it's all over the place, or yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's good to have that. Like, I think having a consistent process, or at least like having a consistent starting point is really key, because then, it kind of points you in the right direction of where to go first, as opposed to like the people that are just like, they aimlessly search for problems, and then because they have no clear path or no clear process, they just find themselves in this giant rabbit hole of finding and creating new problems in their minds, and just takes forever to finish a mix if you do that. Oh, rabbit holes.
Yeah. How long do you find it takes you to normally finish a mix?
Depending, honestly, let's call it 12 hours.
Okay.
Like a day. Including recalls. If there are recalls, I'd say the whole thing is 6 to 12 hours. Occasionally 14 if it's like a massive production. It could be a day and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Deal, because like you do the first day, and then it's like you got to come back the second day and just start automating things like crazy because there's stuff everywhere. It really depends. Yeah, I'm fairly. That's a long time, so I'm slow and meticulous.
Hey, but to each their own, right?
Yeah, I wish I was faster. I really do. It takes so long.
Yeah, everyone's got their own thing, right? And I guess there's lots of different ways to speed up the process if you want to get into like, macros or templates and going down that rabbit hole for sure. There's ways to speed it up, but at the end of the day, as long as you're getting that meticulous sound, that's all that matters, right? With it, right? Is there a point, like how do you know when a mix is done? Is there a specific point in your process where you're like, okay, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, it's done? Or what does that look like for you? How do you know when to call it quits?
I don't know if I do. It's probably a deadline, or, yo, this rips. If you think it rips, we're good here. Like, yeah, I'm usually confident in what I'm handing in, especially if like we've already done a round of notes. I'm like, I feel great about this. If there's anything you want, holler.
Yeah. So it's more of like getting the artist's approval, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I always try to give it like I'll send it at 95% because I don't want to get a note back being like, this particular vibe thing is wrong, which is very rare, like to have something that large, but yeah. Yeah,
your 95% might be 100% or it might be 50% on the artist side. So,
right.
It's good to have those check-ins to see where they're at with it and make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, very cool.
So there'll usually be like a first mix I'll send out, and then we'll like go back and forth with that. And then once we have that first song, that's probably like a good representation of the record. Like maybe not the hit, but not the slowest song, not the fastest song, has a little bit of everything. Then I'll go and do the whole entire record and send that to them.
Yeah, very cool. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about when it comes to your productions is that, like, when I listen to bands like Beach Bunny or the Sonderbombs who you worked with, like, when I listen to those albums, what really caught my attention about those albums specifically is that they tend to have these, like, really big choruses, but what's interesting about them is that if you listen to the guitars, they tend to be very clean. And I think, like, in most, like, rock style music, most people would just throw on distortion for choruses and call it, you know, it's now a chorus, it's louder, right? But what I really liked about those records is that they tend to be like clean guitars, and it's kind of unique to hear that, especially in that kind of genre. So I'm curious to know, like, when it comes to creating, you know, a chorus that sounds big, even with a clean guitar, like, how do you go about doing that? Like, what's the trick to making that work and not making it feel like it is just a continuation of the verse and you know, that same amount of energy, you know, like how do you get that lift out of the choruses?
Automation. I mean, not just to boop the volume, although I also do that. Lots of parallels, and I'll change what maybe the parallel is. I'll add width. I'll make the reverbs and delays bigger. Like, just lots of, like, if it's steady at a point, if the instruments aren't changing, all the extra things I'm doing to the instrument could change. Like, maybe I'll do a side shelf automation on the music bus by like half a dB, so everything just gets half a dB brighter on the sides, and maybe I'll put a widener on the vocal reverb, so that feels bigger. Maybe I'll throw in another parallel for the guitars. It's just like making that is distortion. So you're hearing the attack and the chiminess and the buzzcocks or the clashness of the string attack, but like you're getting that meatiness underneath it, and then I'll take it out when it goes back to the verse. So it may not, gotcha. Your ear won't go to like, oh, it got more distorted, but like it's in there.
Yeah, it's just like tucked in there just for the fatness and the warmth that it provides. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I heard, but like, yeah, it was always the main guitar, especially with those two artists. It's like the main guitar would always be the clean one that would get my attention. And yeah, I'm just so used to hearing, like, you know, bands just crank on a distortion pedal for the chorus or whatever. So yeah, I thought that was really cool to hear. And I think there's something cool about clean guitars in the sense that, like, when you're getting to like those bigger choruses, like, yeah, like you said, you have that attack there and you get that definition, and it's not just a wall of fuzz. You know, there's like the intricate details of the guitar there. So it's very cool.
Yeah. Or maybe there is a distorted guitar in the middle. Maybe we didn't have time. Maybe we were going to record a bigger guitar there. Yeah. Or maybe it is a different guitar, but it's just like a little more dirty than the first one.
Yeah, that's fair. Or maybe it's like a different pickup or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah.
Very cool. Do you have any like go-to setups that you like to use when it comes to getting nice, clean guitar sounds?
I bring like tools that I might need, tape, a flashlight. I have like a little kit that I'll bring if we're not going to my studio, which is often of things. But the only piece of gear I bring is the double barrel by JHS. It's basically it's a tube screamer. It's like a souped up tube screamer on one side, which I use occasionally. But the other side is, what the hell's it called? I'm drawing a blank on the name of the other side, but it's just a plexi clone pretty much. So it's grit and a lot of definition.
That's very cool. So that's just like a pedal that has like those two kind of I guess forms of distortion or gain or whatever to them.
Transparent overdrive, basically, and I'll use that to push that. If I'm not where I want to be in a quick amount of time with the guitar tone, I might immediately grab that and just start stacking things on top of that. Like usually we'll pick the amp, we'll pick the guitar, and then I'll have just like a table of pedals next to me that I run through like a fucking crazy person, like doing different tones. Like it's like, okay, for this part, I'll just like plug in this, try to do it as fast as I can. I'll have like them all on a table and like all the cables and just pedals flying fucking everywhere. Yeah, I do love going mad scientist on the guitar tones, because I try to do it fast because people are sitting there like, and we're in the moment. I try not to spend too much time on things.
Yeah, fair enough. Are there any go-to amp combos that you like?
I makes me feel like corny, but I really like just like the low wattage Marshall-y stuff, like the JMPs and like anything that sort of does that, like low wattage Supros. I have a hand wired AC30 that I love. I have an AC15 at home just as my home amp, because I just love the sound of that like clear, punchy electric guitar.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you just said, why didn't this chorus get all distorted? And I do like that. Don't get me wrong. I do plenty of that. But as a starting point, it's that kind of stuff.
For sure. Well, and you're also a guitar player too, so you would have that natural inclination to have a specific sound. I guess it is like, it's the sound that you probably like would gravitate towards in your mind, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Cool. Another thing about your records that I really like is the sound of your snare drums. Dude, like snare to me, like as you know, I'm a drummer, and like snare is the one thing that to me on a record, like it always drives me nuts getting the right sound. But the thing that I found with your snares are that they always sound really meaty. They sound really nice. They got a lot of good body to them. With just enough top end bite to like cut through the mix, but without it being obnoxious or being too bright. So I'm curious to know, like when it comes to getting a great snare tone, what's your typical process for that as well?
That is something I'll spend time on, because as you know, it's the thing you'll hear sometimes multiple times a second for the entire song. And if we're going to like if we're just at drums, and then we have to do all this stuff after it, and then I have to spend, 12 hours mixing something after that, and the fucking snare drum isn't right. Like, no bueno. I'm not going to be able to pay attention. It's going to drive me fucking nuts. Yeah. So I'll definitely spend time on it. I've hired a while ago, I would bring my friend Shane to drum tech for certain projects, because I just liked the way he tuned drums. And so it was worth it for me to bring him. Unfortunately for him, I learned a lot from him and got good at it. So I don't bring him as much anymore. And then on top of that, once I learned how to put the drums where I want them, I found not drum dial, TuneBot. And that's great because you're in the middle of the session, and we're keeping the guitars, we're keeping the bass, and it's like, oh, it's the 8th hour of the day, and it's like, is the snare right? Did the rack tom drop? That's great, because then I can just run in there, put the TuneBot on it, and be like, oh, it did drop. I don't have to like overthink things, or it's like they're smoking cigarettes. I'll just go in there and grab the TuneBot and just check to make sure everything's where we agreed it sounded the best. It's like, oh fuck, like the floor tom dropped like, a significant amount in that last song because it was very floor tommy.
Yeah. And for people who don't know what the TuneBot is, it's like it reads out the frequencies of every lug on your drum so that you could see if it detuned or what happened with it, and easy to recall those same settings because you just dial it back to that same frequency that you had initially chosen. So that's very cool. I like that you use that.
No, it's awesome because it's not going to tune it for you, but it'll like keep it where you want it.
Yeah. It's funny. I had the drummer of August Burns Red on the podcast a while ago, and he was the first one that told me about, like, I knew of the TuneBot, but I didn't really know anyone that was using it on a regular basis. And he was telling me about how he uses it for everything. They use it live, they use it in the studio. Yeah. And after that episode, I ended up buying one, and yeah, it's great, man. I love it. Like it's such a handy tool to have, and it definitely, like, it's great to be able to recall settings and like have, you can save different drum kits for a drum kit preset. So you can have a whole bunch of sounds already pre-stored and, just a matter of tuning to those frequencies. It's great for that.
Yeah. And I just like it because it's midway through the day, towards the end of the day, like I'm the drum tuner and the engineer and the producer. My ears are like not tip top. I can still listen for mistakes, but like once we got the tones, like, there's a slight dullness coming over my ear. So I cannot maybe necessarily pick out with all these harmonics flying around in a drum and I'm trying to tune it and it's like dinner time. It's hard, but having that thing there is just like, mwah, thank you.
Yeah. Do you find that are you the type of person that likes to tune drums to like the key of the song or does that matter to you? Okay.
Yeah.
you just go for whatever sounds best.
I start tuning things. I make sure the toms feel like they're living in a similar world, but
yeah. As far as going back to the snare, like, do you have a preference for how you tune your snares? Like, do you like to have them low tuned or like what's that normally look like for you?
Cranking the bottom, a little bit of length on the snare wires themselves to get, depending on the tempo. But I do usually like to have that as an option. The longer decay of the snare wire, even if it's like a fast song, like. I just feel like it sounds like music to me. It makes it sound real. And the top, it depends on, it's maybe tempo related. Like if I know there's some songs that are like a slightly different vibe or a different tempo, I'd be like, hey, let's do them first or do them last, or at least do them together. And then I'll like probably drop the pitch or use the big fat snare. I like that guy's a sort of a secret.
Those are cool.
Secret weapon, like indie rock crack. Thud. It just does the thing.
Yeah, those things just like are instant beef when it comes to the snare drum.
Yeah.
I mean, they tune your drums down quite a bit, but yeah, they definitely have that fatness to it.
Yeah. And it can be good for like an inconsistent drummer too. Like even if it's not the move for the sound of the drum, if a drummer's like a little like not always hitting in the center and all the hits are not like maybe the same volume, like that kind of stuff, like really my ear just goes there and I have trouble paying attention to other things. I might just throw that on there and be like, problem solved. Like it's not the perfect drum sound for this, but like it's a more consistent snare hit each time.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good observation because it definitely does kind of give you a more consistent volume overall.
It's a volume thing. Yes.
It's a dampener. Yeah. That's all it is, right? So you're dampening things so that they sound more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very cool observation. I like that a lot. And it's interesting you bring that up because one thing that I thought I was hearing on a lot of your records is that I thought I was hearing saturation on the snares. Is that something you like to add, or is that maybe just that big fat snare drum? Because sometimes that in itself makes it sound like it's saturated.
Rarely is there not saturation on a parallel snare or on a parallel drum bus.
Gotcha.
Like usually I'll in the template, there's a parallel kick, there's a parallel snare, and then there's a parallel all the drums. And then I'll mess with how much of each thing I send to the parallel all the drums. And the kick and snare always start off muted, and then I'll bring them in as needed because I like having them on separate things because the decays are different.
Mm-hmm.
So if like there's a double kick and then a snare, like you don't want the parallel compressor to be reacting to not even like gone back from that last kick drum before the next snare hits. So having them like being able to give the snare drum length on its parallel or drive it crazy with some compression, I have to like it's not going to go if like a kick drum's coming right after it. So that way I can sort of dial in the decay and its anger level.
That's cool.
It's
I like
Saint
that.
Anger level.
Yeah, just throw a Saint Anger sample on everything, and then you get great drum sounds. Yeah. No, that's very cool, and I haven't heard anyone explain it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. That if you're just sending everything to one drum bus, then of course, if you're going to lose that customization of the parallel for the kick and snare, I guess, because they're feeding off each other as a group.
Yeah, and the attack and release times, like they're usually different for the kick and snare for me.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna have to add that to my template. I like that.
Nice.
Do you, with your drum parallel channel, is it usually just like, are you the kind of person that sends the entire, like you'll send cymbals and shells to it, or do you just send the shells to it? Like I know some people don't like adding cymbals to their parallel channel because maybe it makes it too washy, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
It depends if the parallel is a compression or a distortion. It's all dependent. Usually I'll have the like overheads like pretty low. Like I'll add it in there like a little bit. Like a hi-hat will be in there a little bit. A kick might not be in there as loud as other things, but I mess with that. Like I pull up all those on the sends on the faders and just sort of close my eyes and see where I see how pushing into the compressor or the distortion is reacting. Yeah. Like if there's a hi-hat mic, I'm not fucking sending that. Yeah.
No one wants to hear more hi-hat anyway.
God, why did I put that there?
Do you have any go-tos for saturation on drums?
Yeah, what is on the template? The black box I like, the plugin alliance. I'm if it's not a fast song, Devil Lock is it just makes things sound crazy. I love it. Those are probably like the main dirts I use on drums. I think there's something else in the template. I'm drawing a blank right now, but
yeah, those are all pretty good ones, and they'll give you quite a range of sound for sure.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, man, I I love learning more about people's templates and how they've got it all set up, because it's just there's so many different, like we were talking about earlier, there's so many different ways to approach it, and when you have someone who can explain why they build their template the way it does, it like gives you all sorts of new ideas for what you can do and how to experiment within your own sessions. So that's very cool. I guess at the end of the day, when it comes to these mixes, like, like I asked you earlier with like what makes a great song, like what in your opinion makes a great mix?
When I'm going, fuck yeah. When I'm like, I crushed it. When I like it. Like, that's a like,
great answer.
I usually working from home is a double-edged sword for sure. But if I'm actively in the middle of a mix, I'll leave it on. And so I'll go have dinner and like not work on music for 3 hours or something. But I'll always come back and hit play or bring up one of the other mixes and just like listen to the bounce and like make some notes, and that's usually when I'm like, we're good. Like I love this. Or I'll use that song to like reference the other ones. Like, does it rip as hard as this third one I mixed?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's a great answer. Right on, man. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so we could probably start to wrap things up here. But if people want to learn more about you and the productions that you do, or maybe even potentially work with you, what's the best way for them to follow you online?
I believe there's a joereinhart.com. It's best sandwich ever on Instagram, and yeah, it should be, if you put band or music next to my name, it should come up as Google. It should come up in Google. Yeah.
By the way, I love your Instagram handle. It was great.
Thank you.
Right on, man. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And it was great learning more about your process and learning more about your templates and how you have everything set up. And I definitely think that there's a lot of great stuff here that people could take from this episode. So thank you again.
Thanks. I hope so. I mean, I learned it from someone else. And that's the thing. Like you were saying, it's like you just collect the info and then you do whatever works for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, right on, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good talk.
Yeah. So that was my interview with Joe Reinhart, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed learning about how he sets up his sessions, and I thought it was very cool to learn more about his templates and how he does things. And definitely there was some stuff in there that I'm going to implement into mine. I really like that idea of having a separate parallel channel for your kick and for your snare, because, he's right. Like, your kick and snare, they kind of work like a call and response of each other all the time. Usually you have like a kick that's followed by a snare, that's followed by a kick and a snare. They kind of always go back and forth. That's how most drum grooves are set up. So by having each of those on its own separate parallel channel, it really allows you to shape the sounds and the sustain to fit the sound that you want, right? You can make your snare sound longer, you can make it sound shorter, whatever you want. You have a lot of flexibility when they're separate. So I really enjoyed learning about how he did that, and also learning about just his whole process in terms of how he tackles guitars and how he tackles drums, all that kind of stuff. And I also really resonated with what he was saying earlier on in the conversation about working with bands and producing those songs and making sure that everyone is paying attention to what the other musicians in the band are doing. That is definitely one of the biggest problems that I see whenever it comes to producing bands. And so next time you're working with your band, make sure to strip things down for a bit, maybe play your song acoustically and listen to the little details that everyone's playing. Make sure that everyone's playing the same rhythms, the same strumming patterns, that, your kick and your bass are lining up with each other. All these little details that make a band tight, they're sometimes really hard to hear in a big, loud room. So I love that Joe brought that up because it's so important for any band that's going into the studio. And for anyone who's trying to self-produce their songs, you always need to get that fresh perspective and not just hear that cacophony of sound in a rehearsal space. So I thought that was really cool that Joe brought that up too. So I really enjoyed this episode. I hope that you did as well. And if you did, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way you're notified about all new episodes as they go live each and every week. And if you're struggling to get your home recordings to sound as good as your favorite artists, and you're not sure what steps to take to get your music to get to that level, and you're looking for someone who can give you personalized advice in terms of what you should be doing with things like EQ, compression, volume, etc., then I want to tell you about my coaching program, Amplitude. Inside of that program, you get one-on-one personalized advice and guidance. I walk you through exactly what to do with your mixes. Whenever you have songs done, you simply send them to me. You have a direct line of communication with me. You'll get personalized videos showing you exactly what you should do with your tracks. There's in-depth training to help you master the different mixing tools and to help you start to work faster and build templates that are going to help you get better results faster and feel way more confident in your process. There's also mastering in this program. There is just so much stuff jam-packed inside of Amplitude, and I would love to work with you inside of it. So if you're the type of person who's currently working on a new project and you want to take your mixes to the next level, you want to gain way more confidence in the steps to take, what tools to use, all of that kind of stuff, then definitely make sure to check out Amplitude. Visit MasterYourMix.com/Amplitude. And I'd love to show you a demo of what you can expect inside of the program. So if you're interested in learning more, again, visit MasterYourMix.com/Amplitude. And there's a little form at the bottom. Just fill that out. And I would love to show you around and talk more about how I can help you inside of this program to make sure that you're getting the results that you're looking for. So with that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. Talk soon. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. To have your questions answered, submit your questions to questions@masteryourmix.com. Please go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And for more information on how you can improve your mixes, visit MasterYourMix.com.